Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Driving through the streets of Bombay or in Delhi.
I love that you use the word Bombay.
Yeah.
I wish this could be Bombay also, but I have to be
It's fine.
correct.
It's fine. I think Bombay sounds more romantic.
It does.
Because they named gin after it. My favorite gin.
Bombay Sapphire,
Yes.
the best ever.
So, thank you so much everyone for taking the time. Apologies for the delay in starting. And thank you, Brian, for coming all the way from San Francisco. And my first question to you before we start off the day is, do you prefer terrorism or counterterrorism?
Ooh. In what context? Oh, on Counter-Strike. Oh, Jesus, yeah. That's really hard to ask. I was like, what?
I know,
That's a heavy question. I definitely on the CT side.
You like
yeah.
the CT side?
Yeah.
Nice. And are you an assault rifle guy?
Assault rifle, yeah. Or AWP, or shotgun.
Okay. Wow,
Yeah. Not auto shotgun, normal shotgun.
I'm a terrorist Khalil kind of guy.
Oh.
Get in there,
The AK?
get two guys and die.
Yeah.
The die usually happens when I like crack it.
Yeah.
Okay. So a quick brief about Startup Grind. So I just came on board as the Mumbai chapter director, and the idea is to anchor personalities like Brian and people who've been there, done that. In fact, Brian is one of the. We're very lucky to have Brian here because I doubt we've met many 19-year-olds who managed to get their first VC fund. Like, leave alone, think of a concept and work on it, build it. And Brian, I'd best like Brian to speak from his own words about himself because I don't think I can do justice to that. Apart from that, Startup Grind has three primary values, which is first is give first and don't ask. Second is make friends and don't make contacts. And the third one is basically help others before you help yourself. And we would quickly move into a little bit about Brian Wong's background and speak a little bit about Kiip and what he's doing. And we'll just start.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I was in town for a lot of things. I think India has a ton of opportunity. We're in the mobile advertising business, and I think you guys are sitting in one of the world's most exciting mobile advertising markets, primarily because everything is going in the right direction, right? You're talking, obviously smartphone penetration overall, but because, incomes are rising, disposable incomes are rising, middle class is growing substantially, smartphone prices are declining, basically everything is moving in the right direction, right? Airtel's getting its shit together and now you can actually get service in places. I mean, you got like a lot of really good things happening. So you guys have, I wanted to start it off by saying, Silicon Valley, who gives a fuck? You guys are literally in almost another world. And the world that you're in is mobile first everything, right? So everyone who's young is buying a smartphone and a tablet as their first device, right? They're not buying a desktop. I had to buy a clunky ass tower PC and then get to a tablet, then get to my nerdy ass pocket PC and then go to my whatever the fuck I ended up buying after that. The first device a youth is buying is a smartphone here, which means so many opportunities. I've been learning about services like Paytm. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I had to learn about it, right? And I get there's an Alipay kind of clone-like dynamic, but it is very Indian in its nature. I think, for example, people seeing the Paytm points and then paying less money, feeling like they're paying less money for something, getting that deal, I think they love it. So it's very exciting. Anyways, all right, back to me. So my quick background, I'm originally from Canada. I was born and raised in Vancouver. And I look like I'm 12 for a reason. I'm actually 25 now. But I started my company when I was 19. And so I actually grew up in Canada. My parents, by the way, are from Hong Kong, which is why I look Chinese. Or apparently northeastern India has a lot of people, right? Like Assam around there, right? Yeah, okay, that's what I've learned. Anywho, so I skipped 4 grades in elementary school and high school, so I went into university when I was 14, and then I graduated university. Don't worry, you can do that in Canada. Like it's really like loose. I graduated uni at 18, and then that's when I decided to move down to San Francisco and start the company. Kind of the background is very easy to explain. He started off by asking me about Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is a video game. It is a really popular first-person shooter game that is a big part of my childhood, which was like last year. And the childhood that I had was playing these video games at some points almost up to 8 hours a day. Like, that's how addicted I was. And that's also why I decided to skip grades. So it's like, if I have that much fucking time to play video games, probably should just, you know, skip ahead. And that's actually how I got into tech, was through these games. So I'm gonna nerd out for a second for all of you who do play these games. You may know that as an online a game, you have teammates. Right? You play with teammates. They call them clans. And then in my clan, they all wanted a sexy insignia, like a logo for the clan. And so they're like, someone design a logo. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go do it. So of course I go off to pirate a copy of Photoshop, because who the hell buys one when you're 12 years old? So I got my copy of Photoshop. And I started to learn on my own how to design. So I went on Google, and I just went into forums, and I started to self-teach. So I got pretty good at design, and it took me a few years. So I started at 12, and then basically at 16 is when I started my first web design company.
Wow.
And how I started the first web design company, which is not Kiip, that's not the company I have today, was basically I know it's really hard to believe, but I play ice hockey. So I know, like, I'm really buff when I'm on the ice with all my equipment. But I play ice hockey, and actually I started playing ice hockey when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
So it's been a while. It's been 19 years.
Is it Canada's national sport?
It is, yes. And curling is actually technically the national sport. Curling. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of curling. Yeah, okay. You have curling here?
No.
Oh, but you've heard of it. Okay. Okay, because yeah.
Actually, you don't even have water here.
Yeah, I know. You're like. Anywho, so I was playing ice hockey when I was 16, and I actually was involved in a on-ice incident. I got hit in the knee by another knee. So like there's a knee-on-knee hit. And usually, most sports have knee-on-knee hits, right? And they're pretty illegal. They're not allowed. In hockey, you're just going 3 times faster, right? And so I broke my knee. And I was in a wheelchair for like a month, and then crutches for like 5 months. And usually when you can't move, you kind of have a few choices, right? You can play a lot of video games, which I already was doing anyways, watch porn, or start a company. So I decided to start a company. And so I had 2 buddies of mine. One was in back end, one was in front end, I was in design. So we all said, hey, why don't we just start building websites for people?
You were 16 at that time.
16 at the time. And it was, we called it not a web design agency, we called it a design consultancy. Because when you say something's consulting, you can charge 10 times more, right? It's great. So we did this to work with small businesses, and we weren't ripping them off. We were actually, at some point we grew to 15 people. It was like 5 full-time people and 10 contractors as we were kind of building out these sites.
Very cool.
So anyways, fast forward, I actually didn't go to school for engineering or design or anything. I decided to go to business school. So in high school in Canada, I think high school and really anywhere in the world, you don't get to learn business, right? It's not like a business class or anything. So I was very curious. So I decided to go into business, and in Canada they call it commerce, or any colonial or Commonwealth country they call it commerce. I actually decided to do marketing. That was my concentration. And why? So I don't know if you know, if you guys have the same system here, but you get to pick your concentration, right? Between marketing, finance, accounting, all this stuff, right?
Parents pick that for us.
Or parents pick you for doctor, right? And you're doing born. So in Canada, the way it works is you actually have to, you get to choose your concentration by your grades, right? So if your grades are the highest, you get to pick the concentration first. Of course, finance was the first, got taken out, right? My grades are pretty bad, actually. Yes, granted, I skipped 4 grades. It doesn't matter. Put that aside. But I picked marketing because it was the only one available, and the girls are cuter. So I was like, okay, I'm good. So went in, and graduated in 2009. The economy, as you guys recall, in 2009 was pretty bad. The world was still reeling from the subprime crisis. And I was struggling to find a job. Even though, yes, I had the web design company, I thought it's time for me to go sit down and do a full-time job. So I decided to go to San Francisco because Silicon Valley, right? Like, I'd never been to California before in my life until I was 18. Never been. As a kid, like, we grew up in a pretty modest household, like, you know, lower middle class type of thing. And we had no money to travel. That's why, like, going down to California and all over the US didn't happen. So while I was doing this web design company, we put money aside and we created this travel fund, which was literally just for us to travel around and experience things. But obviously for work as well. So went down to San Francisco and I met up with a bunch of, well, first of all, Silicon Valley, I was like, I gotta go see this because it's like nerd heaven, right? Like, I'm sure there's like silicon chips like lining the valley. Like, what does it look like? So I showed up. And before I even went there, actually, I cold emailed a whole bunch of people. So, by the way, I'm going to talk about this in a second, but cold emailing, by the way, is like the best tool in life. Like, if you ever want something, cold emailing, anything you want in life, I'm talking money, you know, power, fame, cold emailing gets you it. I'm not even kidding. And cold LinkedIn adding. Like adding people on LinkedIn randomly, right? And by the way, adding people on LinkedIn randomly is like Tinder for like business. Because you add them and if they don't accept you, okay, whatever, you don't like me. If you accept me, you want to do business, yes. And then you just message them right away and say, hey, thanks for adding me or accepting my request. Let's talk about how we could brainstorm working together. I love the word brainstorm. Anyways, I'm going off on tangents. But cold emailing. So I guessed the email addresses of all the people that I wanted to meet, including this guy. His name is Kevin Rose. He started a company called digg.com, which is a lot like Reddit, if you guys are big fans of Reddit. But as you guys know, Reddit exists now, and Digg is just a very sad shadow of its former self. But anywho, so he responded and he introduced me to his VP of Business Development. And then this VP of Business Development introduced me to his associate. And then his associate, I'm kidding, and then his associate met with me. And I got a job. So I got a job in business development. As a Canadian, you actually need a visa. I've been on, by the way, just so you guys know and feel less bad, I've been on an H-1B for 6 years. And I finally got my green card 4 months ago. So I feel your pain. I know how annoying H-1Bs are. So as a Canadian, you still have to apply for a fucking H-1B, okay? It's crazy. So I got my visa, and then I moved down to the US in January of 2010. So I hope you guys are following. Now we're 2010 now, okay? In May of 2010, Google changed their algorithm, and basically, you guys are familiar with Reddit, right? Yeah, so Reddit obviously has a page that links to a news article or some weird animated GIF that now is viral. And so what Google did was they swapped the page rank of the Digg link versus the actual link it was linking to. So what happened was Digg lost 20% of its traffic overnight. 20% of its revenues evaporated overnight. Basically, they were now hurting. So they had to make layoffs. So I just told you that I started in January, right? Okay, and now it's May. 5 months later, I got laid off. Wow. There wasn't an internship, this was a full-time job, okay? So I get laid off. It's like kind of a scene out of a TV show. So it was like midnight, I flew back, I took the first flight home back to Vancouver, I needed to tell my parents what had happened. I show up, it's like midnight, it's raining. I knock on my parents' apartment door, and then my dad comes out with a hammer. He thinks I'm breaking in, and then I tell my mom what had happened. And now Mother's Day is in May. My mom said it was the worst Mother's Day present she'd ever gotten. And then following Mother's Days, I tried to make it up to her. But basically, I had no visa. I lost my visa as well. So when you lose your job, as you know, it's tied to your employer. I lost my visa. So basically, I went back to the US. I was like, what do I do, right? I only know contacts in a professional context in San Francisco. So I decided that was the place for me, just to go back as a visitor. So I went back as a visitor, and that's where I got the idea for Kiip. So I was on a flight. I remember looking up and down the aisles. I saw people on their phones. They were playing a lot of games. And they still are playing a lot of games. It's not like it's ever changed. And then my whole insight was the ads on these games. I'm sure many of us have seen ads just in any app that you use on your phone, right? And I realized these ads were awful, right? There's a fundamental, as an entrepreneur, you try to solve problems, right? You realize there's a huge problem when you never have ever seen a normal human being look at their phone and go, well, yeah, look at that banner ad. I'm going to tap on it now, intentionally. I love it. No one ever does that, right? And the fact that that doesn't happen is a huge problem. So we decided to make it a different model. So the way that we grew the model was, instead of an ad in that moment when you're using an app, you can get rewarded. So imagine leveling up in a game and then Starbucks is there to reward you, McDonald's is there to reward you, whatever. So fast forward, and I'll let you ask your next question in a second, but fast forward now we have 120 people, San Francisco, New York. We've now we just raised our C round. We closed it 2 months ago. Now in total we've raised 32 million, and we are growing. And as of Q4 of last year, we're profitable. And so it's just been a crazy, crazy journey.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On scoring your next round of funding.
Thank you.
Guys, a big round of applause, please.
Now,
Guys, like 33 million? Is it?
32.
32 million, yeah, like at least.
No. So let me explain though. And you clap, and in one way, it's celebrating that we have the security and we have people who are willing to spend money on our equity, which is very good. But I need to share something with you guys, and I'm sure many of you are founders and you have investors or want to have investors. Every dollar you raise is like a drop of blood, right? It is actually not necessarily free money. It's not. They're buying a piece of you. You're literally, giving that to them. And just so you guys know, this round for me, the C round, I've talked about this publicly already. It took us 6 months to raise. So even 3 rounds in, 10 plus million in revenue, doubling year over year, I still needed to take 6 months to raise this round.
Why is it so difficult?
Because we're in the advertising market. And advertising is viewed by investors as, right now, very unstable. No one knows what's going to happen. You see Yahoo getting sold for peanuts. AOL obviously got sold for sort of peanuts. Basically you have all this sort of like, uncertain data points. Then you have, for example, we were just talking media.net, right? Your fellow Mumbai celebrity, he just sold for 900 million to some phantom Chinese company that no one knows exists yet. I'm kidding. I mean, obviously that's a good thing, right? So for me, that's promising because that data point means that there's exit potential for these types of things. But anyways, that being said, advertising is really an interesting market when it comes to investors. Sometimes people seem to forget that the world's biggest, I'm talking the 2 biggest internet companies in the world, 100% of the revenues are advertising, basically, right? So, right? It's almost like, why do you hate it so much when all the money that's funding the biggest internet companies in the world is from ads?
Yeah.
So anyways, I'll leave that there. But next question.
All right, so
I have a question for you.
Oh, hey, go ahead.
What happened to your first business?
It just continued, actually. So one of my co-founders still runs it, and it's renamed a couple times, and it still has its book of business, and it's a lifestyle business, right? It's good to run an agency, have a markup, pay your salaries, it's cool, right? So.
all right. Thank you so much for running us down.
No worries, yeah.
And we'll come back to the present. So what are your thoughts on Pokemon Go and the disruption that it's created? I'll ask the question.
So when someone asks me, do you play Pokemon Go, I say I don't do drugs. And as you can see, I don't know how it's like here. Is it even here? It's not even here. Is it here? Oh, you can play Pokemon Go here.
Not officially.
Not officially.
Indians have it.
With a VPN or with a, what do you do?
With a cracked APK and with a lot of other.
Oh, cracked APK. Okay, got it. So here's the thing about Pokemon Go is that in the US, it's already died out as a thing. I'm sure there's a core audience. It's still very large. I'm sure there's still like 5 million people playing it right now, but compared to the 20, 30, 40 million that it's supposedly at, it's a shadow of what it was. I think Pokemon is a reminder, though, that brand equity is incredibly powerful. This was not an overnight success. This was a 20-year-long success. This was Pokemon brainwashing us from a kid. Yes, and now it seems to be cool and ironic to like something you like from your childhood, and I think that was the reason why basically everyone who downloaded it was in our age group, right? And then all of a sudden younger people were like, what's this Pokemon thing? And then they have their own shit, right? Like it's like, you know, it's really interesting. But those are my general thoughts about it.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'll leave it to the audience to probe more on that.
Yeah, yeah.
The third one is essentially when it comes to, like you said, your drop of blood. Every dollar you take is equivalent to a drop of blood. Like, when would you say would be the best time to go approach funding? Like,
so always the rule of thumb, and by the way, I'm just going to do a quick survey. How many of you are running your own startup? Put up your hand. Okay. How many of you work at another startup? Okay. The best time to raise is when you don't need the money. It's basically the rule of thumb. Yeah. But, and I'm going to give you a bunch of data points, by the way, but you're always raising. You're never not. Meaning every potential person who's rich enough to give you money, you're pitching them, right? But you're pitching them, meaning you are making the connection, you're getting connected, you're getting familiar with each other. I'm about to give you guys a crash course. How many of you raised your first round already? Your seed round?
seed or something?
Seed, you done your seed? And no one's raised anything beyond that? No one's raised an A round or whatever? How many of you bootstrapped then? So you're all bootstrapped, right? Technically, or your parents are just really rich, which is bootstrapping. Anyways, that's a form of it. Okay, and how many of you want to raise money from investors? Okay, all right. So the way you do this is, again, like I said, you don't raise when you need it. What you do is you start to meet these people. And I will tell you straight up, you will never get a term sheet within the first time meeting a cold contact. Like let's say you met them at an event or you got introduced even, you meet the person. This shit just doesn't happen, right? So you hear all these fairy tales of, you know, people showing up with term sheets. You're not that, okay? So don't hope on that. You need to build a relationship over time. The way that VCs work is they want to be familiar with your ability to execute. They're looking at your track record, and if you don't have an established track record already in that you've, let's say, exited before or whatever, that's fine. You just need to show them that you are really good at making shit while they've now hovered into your stratosphere. So for example, let's say you meet a VC. Again, you don't even need to pitch them hard. Just say, hey, I've got a startup. Here's what it does. That's very cool. And I'd like to stay in touch. And literally every month, send them an update. They don't even have to ask for it. Just send them, hi, we just want to update you. You know, we've been building this, we've been building that. In the next 2 months, we're expecting this and that and this and that and this and that. Pretend they're already your investor. Then keep emailing them every month. I'm talking for the next 6 months. Then at some point at the end of that period, you go, listen, you know, I just want to let you know that, you know, and then by the way, with these emails, you've consistently executed, right? You've said good things, it looks like you're growing, all that stuff. At the end of that 6 month period, you then tell them in this email, listen, we're just getting a lot of inbound interest and we can't hold it off any longer. And so I think we're probably going to start a process for our next round. That's the keywords. Start a process for our next round. By the way, VCs love speaking in code words, okay? There's a lot of stuff that you won't understand right away, and then you get, oh, that's what that means, right? You say, well, I'm gonna start a process. Then they're gonna go, wow, I just saw this person execute for 6 months. This is amazing, right? And then the way you also think about it is you're not pitching this person. You're enabling this person with information so that they can convince their partners. Because most VCs don't operate independently. They have a whole partnership. Obviously, unless there's a big angel investor that just seems to fall in love with your concept, in love with you, that's a bit different. But when you're looking at a VC, they are talking to their partnership. So you want to get to the point, though, where they're willing to take you in front of the partnership. And that is where you get the closest to getting a decision. You show up at the partners meeting. This is a code word, partners meeting. Okay, you guys ever heard partners meeting before? Partners meeting is code word for Mondays that they all gather and chat about the deals that they've been working on, and then you present in front of them, and then if they like it, they can approve the investment within that day and give you the term sheet. So that's a very basic overview, but that's generally speaking globally how the world of VC operates. Now there's so many other avenues to raise money these days, right? There's crowdfunding, right? There's borrowing money, I mean, it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you know you can make tons of money within that period of time you're borrowing it, like, it's just that simple. And then, of course, angel investors, and then you have incubators, and then you have the traditional VC.
Thank you so much for that, Brian.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
When talking about funding, right? Just going through the website, the bunch of investors which came on board first. Was it a strategy to approach a strategic investor, or was it only about money?
So, how do I share with you guys this information so that I am respectful? At the end of the day, money is money. Every VC will go to you, every strategic investor will go to you and say, we're more than just the money. And you will never know until they actually invest, right? They can say all they want until they actually show up and they're sitting there and they're actually giving you value, then it's good. I would say in the beginning, anything and everything is great, right? I always see entrepreneurs that are like, well, I don't know if the brand is a tier 2 VC or tier 3, it's not a sexy name, it's not Sequoia, it's not Excel. Who gives a fuck? It's money, take it, right? And then build your business. And then make sure they know that you know what you're doing. I think this is a general rule of thumb, and people will tell me that I'm generalizing, but usually the top tier VCs are the ones that will probably be more involved and be more hands-on with you. The second tier, third tier VCs are usually the ones that will just leave you alone. So in fact, in many ways, it might actually be a better thing to raise from tier 2 and tier 3 VCs.
So this round has been, which category would you put it as?
Oh no, it's a lot of our existing investors, and we brought on a new strategic investor. So US Cellular is a telco in the US, they invested, and then another investor out in the East Coast called North Atlantic Capital. So what happens is, over time, our later stage rounds are very different than early stage, right? Later stage is very metrics driven. It's literally, you have your revenue curve, you have your margins, you have your projected revenues. Like, these are the things that end up being the numbers they calculate everything off of. And then they use market comps. Right, so they literally look at other companies that have IPO'd or have exited and their multiples on their revenue, and then they try to compare you to this. And it's kind of crazy, and it's a little unnecessary, but it is the only way really they can value you at this stage. Early stage is like, blue skies, ooh, this is so exciting, I love this, and they love, so the way I put it is they need to fall in love with you, and they need to fall in love with your idea, but you first. And in order for someone to fall in love with you, you need to be lovable. And a lot of things I see sometimes with entrepreneurs is they're very hard to love. And you need people who are lovable, right? So, by the way, you know how you're lovable is if you're passionate, right? If you're able to gather people around you and recruit a team. These are all things that are critical in understanding a founder profile.
Thank you, Brian. So, quick question. Any plans on going public right here?
I mean, the answer is always, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, but just the question is when, right? And I think, yeah, and with whom. But the thing is with IPOing, I think it's lost its sexy value. At the end of the day, the purpose of an IPO is to give liquidity to a very long list of shareholders if you have a lot, right? That's really what it is. And if you don't have that many and people are not pushing you for liquidity, you can even do internal rounds to do liquidity, get secondary, and then be able to help early investors out or early employees out. That's fine. I mean, there's always ways to do it. But IPOing, I think, and I could go on for hours about this, but I truly believe and this is something that Hillary's been talking about as well on her campaign, which I really admire and I think is really an interesting premise, and I have no idea how she's going to execute it, which is quarterly dynamics. Right? IPOing forces you to focus only in the next 3 months. Everything's about the next 3 months, unless you're Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos has figured out how to build like a reality distortion field where he could lose tons of money and no one seems to care, which is fine because he's Jeff fucking Bezos, right? And he's clearly executed like a madman, and he deserves whatever he's got. But point is, like, IPOing is a very, at the moment, not as appealing outcome. For us, I think what we will do is, I love what I'm doing right now. It's super exciting, right? It's funny that it's been years since iPhones come out, and every year Mary Meeker pushes out this presentation with like all these exciting, sexy trends like AI and self-driving cars and VR, and then there's still mobile ads, right? Still. It's still there. So people forget this shit is still hot. And even in markets like India and Indonesia, it's even more hot, right? Because right now it's like every brand is like, how the hell am I going to reach my consumer if none of them care about television, none of them care about their desktop, don't even own a desktop anymore, and print's been dead. For some reason though, just so you know, this is one of the only markets in the world where print is growing. I mean, thank you, Times of India. People are still buying that paper, and the government subsidies probably. But so many things in India are so like just whoosh, and you're just like learning really these interesting dynamics, which I love. And I've learned not to try to figure it out. Just, it is what it is. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That, I mean, it's more got to do with the fact that tier 2 and tier 3, the literacy levels are just increasing right now.
Yes.
That's really the reason why print is still...
And they're buying the papers. And I think what's going to happen is people are waiting for this, like basically it's like paper is the medium available right now, it's affordable, and then obviously smartphones get to this. And I've learned, some interesting stats like, let's say an average, tier 2 salary for a hardworking person is like, $200 a month, right, type of thing. They'll spend $50 on smartphone and data and whatever connectivity in general. Like basically a quarter of their salary is going to this stuff, which is really interesting. And that's not everyone, obviously, but it's some data points that I heard. But that doesn't make me an expert at all. Like I know nothing. I'm learning. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. In India, the internet penetration is about like 25%, and when it comes to mobile penetration, like it's like in the 60s.
Yeah.
And there was this interesting campaign run by Union Level, where they used
The callback.
Like I'm not. I don't have the exact details coming to mind now, but basically it worked on.
Yeah. Well, the missed call, right? And they play you the content back. Yeah.
And along with that, like just the way the traction built, like they added 1 million subscribers every month.
Yeah.
And to a point where in 1 year, 12 million subscribers, it's just...
It's amazing, yeah.
I mean, the numbers in this country, I can't think of 1 billion people, 1.2, sorry.
Yeah.
I discounted a country somewhere.
Yeah.
Like 1.2 billion people, like the market just within India, it's tremendous.
You know what's also exciting? So you guys have, what's the big guys like Flipkart, Snapdeal, Paytm, Ola, Oyo, okay, got it. But you guys probably have heard of a company called Tencent in China. There is, and obviously Google in the US, there is no Tencent equivalent here in India, right? There's no Indian-born multi-conglomerate or multifaceted internet company that kind of covers everything. Now, Flipkart, I know potentially has an opportunity to do this, but I'm hearing there's various challenges that they're facing, but there's things, and that's why I'm saying it means that you guys are in this early stage where someone, any of you could become the next, Jack Ma or, Sergey or Larry, Yeah.
All right. And so what are the plans for Kiip when it comes to India?
Yeah, so we have 7 million monthly active users already across our 5,000 apps in India. And this is just from the apps that we work with naturally, right? We have 150 million users globally. None of those users are getting rewarded, right? And nor do they expect them because everything we do is surprise. So they don't really know that they don't get any rewards anyways because they never expected it. But so the last couple days in Bombay, I've been meeting with all the brands and agencies are here. And then in Delhi, there's a few brands as well, big companies. And the idea is to see how we can start to pilot some rewards and advertisers in India. One thing I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm looking at it wrong, but I think, and please don't be offended, but I think one of the things that makes what our model does work very potentially well in India is that the consumer is very value driven, right? And there's a lot of coupons and discounts and whatever, and you have this whole dynamic where if you get like 10 rupees off something, someone will literally like drive like 30 minutes to go get something that's not 10 minutes, that's really extreme, but you know what I mean. But it's like the value driven component is what drives a lot of the purchase decisions. There's also less loyalty, as I've heard, in this region. Like if someone gives you like 20 rupees, in fact, just to give an example, is all the mobile wallets, right? So every mobile wallet now has its own offers, and so if you optimize enough of the mobile wallets that you're using, you could probably make like $50 a month just to pay with the right thing, right? Anyway, so all that being said, I think rewards-driven things could potentially do very well. So that's what my thinking is here.
So when it comes to a point which I had read, which was you got your ideas and feedback from your customer, from your clients that were paying you for the advertisements. Like, could you enlighten the room a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so how do I turn this into something actionable here? So actually, this is a good chance to mention this. So this is my new book. It's not actually out in stores until next week. It's coming out September 6th. I'm actually flying to New York for the launch tomorrow. And then I'm going to be with my parents on the next day in Vancouver. And they get mentioned in the book quite a bit, so I'm very excited about it. Anyways, it's called The Cheat Code. And the premise of it is in games you have cheat codes, if you guys remember. And even now, there's cheat codes. And in life, there are cheat codes. That's the premise of the book. So there's 71 life cheat codes. It's available on Amazon. We're going to give away a copy. Don't sell this on eBay, whoever gets this, please. This is, I'll give you a signed copy. Actually, just share it. I think, in fact, you should try to share it with as many people as you can for now. There's an ebook as well you can buy. Anyways, point is, a lot of the cheat codes are about starting businesses, being successful in a big company, personal branding, a lot of different things. So one of the things that you're referring to is what we did to adapt our model. So how many of you guys have pivoted? Put up your hand. Yeah, right? By the way, sorry, Eric Rees, I hate the word pivot. It's a learning process. You're realigning, you're readjusting. It's iterating, of course, but pivoting is so overused. It's just like, sometimes people are proud to pivot. It's like, fuck, no, you're not supposed to be proud to pivot, right? It means that you made a mistake and you're learning from it, and it's fine if you make a mistake once, right? Anyways, point is, we learned that in the beginning, what brands were saying is they would come in and say, oh, let's do something, but oh, you have gamers. Ooh, we don't do gamers, right? We don't target gamers, because they all in their head thinks that the people who play mobile games are still the people that play console games, which is like, the teenager in his mom's basement eating Dominoes, right? But I would sometimes in the meeting, and I don't want to be a dick about it, but if they show me your phone, right? They'd be okay. Like, what the fuck is this? It's solitaire. That's a game, right? And I'm not like that mean, right? But like, the point is they just couldn't get their head over the fact that solitaire is still a gamer, right? Why not look at other types of apps like fitness apps? Because there's achievements in fitness apps too. It's not like leveling up in a game, because leveling up in a game makes you fatter, and fitness, you finish something, you actually get skinnier, right? So could we use this as the equivalent piece? So we took that advice and we built a fitness vertical. Not just for Pepsi, but eventually now is like 25% of our revenue is just from fitness apps, right? So I think what's interesting is you need to find balance. It's like an art. A lot of it's gut driven. There's no data that will tell you this, but a lot of it is listen to your customers. Sometimes they'll whip you around and ask you to do dumb shit, which is very normal, by the way. It happens all the time. But know that if something is very spot on and in your gut you're like, this sounds good, go for it. By the way, one other cheat code. This is more of a personal one. The most important muscle in your body is not your brain or your heart, it's your gut, right? And I know it's not a muscle, you know what I mean? But the point is, I will tell you, every time, I've been doing this for 6 years, every single time I've had a bad gut feeling about a decision and I ignored it, I have gotten slapped in the face, right? And I've gotten burned. And 100% of the time. And you will learn this. It's just that feeling, you say, oh, it's not a good idea. Don't do it, right? Yes, it's a good idea. Go do it, right? This is very important, because as an entrepreneur by nature, you're not going to have full data, right? You're never going to have every data point lined up to make sure that it's a perfect decision. That never happens.
That's true. All right, thank you. And a couple of more personal questions, though, in terms of how do you deal with anxiety, like when you start off young, right?
So you mean anxiety by being afraid that investors aren't going to take you seriously, things like that? Okay. So here's one thing I need you guys to all realize. When you're young, you have a huge advantage. And that is you have the license to learn. And even if you're older, doesn't matter. You can learn. Everyone's always learning. When you're learning and you go into a meeting, people want to teach you. Everyone wants to share with you stuff, because it's built into human nature to want to share and teach things and pass knowledge on, right? One thing about the youth aspect is that it's kind of like I have this cheat code, which is take anything that seems to be a weakness and turn it into a strength. It's like a Jedi mind trick, right? It's very possible to take what you think is a weakness and just, it's a strength. Let me give you a few examples. I'm Chinese. Everyone thinks I'm really good at math, right? I'm not actually that good at math. The fact that I'm Canadian and I came from a very conservative economy, and the humility that comes with a Canadian, basically I'm a small town Canadian kid type of thing. I mean, people would argue and say Vancouver's not really that small of a town, but compared to India, 500,000 people in a city is tiny. So the point is that the fact that I come from different backgrounds, right, gives me a different perspective, right? It means that I'm not living in the Silicon Valley bubble. It means that I can look at business models and ideas as what the rest of the world might potentially think about. And I don't represent all those backgrounds, but for example, you guys come in with a very deep understanding of obviously your own culture, and the fact that you happen to be in a part of the world where everyone is envious of. And I'll explain to you why. I have a board, as some of you may have boards. You're probably too early to have a board. If you have a board, why the fuck should you should not have a board at this stage. But at this stage, I now have a board of directors. They love sending articles around, and they love sharing with me articles about India. And so just so you know, a lot of venture capitalists in the US are eyeing India, and they realize that there's about to be an explosion of very good things, right? So I think did that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
It helps build up the confidence, like when you are open to learning, and you are open to the fact that I'm gonna make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. The problem is in this country, the stigma that people sort of be like, oh, he failed his winter.
Yeah.
Oh, he's done this. Like the way.
I get it. You know, one thing I will share with you is, it's common, I think, across Asian cultures to be kind of the conservative, don't be so loud, don't be the tallest blade of grass, just blend in and everything's gonna work out great, right? The one thing I learned, and in Canada it's the same thing, right? Canada's kind of like the same, we're kind of chill, we do our hockey, we kind of and for example, if you do something great in Canada, you're very humble about it, right? We built the fucking Canada arm in the space station, but we never talk about it, right? We're just Canada's contributed a lot, but we're very quiet, right? One thing I've learned about Americans that I really hope all of you can adapt is they're fucking loud, right? And they love taking the tiniest achievements and then making a huge deal out of it. Ooh, we got our first 1,000 users. Let's throw a party. And then let's submit ourselves to every made-up possible award ever, and then win an award when there really does not need to be an award to be won. And I think this culture of celebration and kind of patting yourself on the back and chest thumping is actually a good thing when it comes to showing the world that you're executing and that you are very excited. So it's not about being big ego, and I'll change your perspective. I know people look at Americans sometimes like huge ego, like why the fuck? It's less about that. It's more about just being constantly executing and showing people that you're doing good things. I think that's how you ward off all these naysayers. Who gives a fuck if people are judging, right? In fact, if someone's judging, one thing I've learned about also just having a lot of these different meetings with all ranges of business folks within this country so far, and I think I don't have as nearly a sample size, but I've had now 20 plus meetings. You have always, any market, a range of people. There's always going to be people that are not as accepting. There are people that are very accepting and very liberal. And I think you just want to spend more time with the people that do respond, that do want to work with you. And in fact, I'll tell you one other thing that I've noticed, and you guys have probably seen this too. Think of the big ass Indian conglomerates, right? The huge, like Bharti and Tata or whatever. And then the guys that built that giant, ugly $billion-dollar house. What is that? Okay, yeah. See, and soon this religious leader, the guy who's making the toothpaste and okay, that guy. Patanjali. There we go. Anyways, these guys realize that their industry is very traditional and they need to connect with the modern perspective to diversify their money and their investments, and a lot of that money is now flowing into tech, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity, and think about it as less of the original, like the older sort of Indian billionaires. It's kind of their kids, and their kids' kids, and their kids' kids, and those not getting this round. So back in the day when we started this process, so I started this process like basically a year and a half ago, early 2015. There was a risk that we weren't going to raise this round. I said, okay, we have about a year's worth of cash left. We were going to run out of money in December, basically. It was like, we have a year's worth of cash left. I need to make sure that I can actually potentially be able to last forever by the end of the year. That's basically what happened. So it was like, we either have to increase revenues, lower costs. Very simple, right? It's like an easy formula. Either or both, right? And then get to the point where you're not burning any money anymore and you can run on your own. And then the logic started to sit in. If I'm at that stage, that means, guess what? I don't need to raise money. And guess what? That's the best time to raise money. So that's exactly what happened. We had a path towards profitability. The message to the VCs were, we don't really need you. And then all of a sudden the round came together. Right? It wasn't that simple. Obviously the other mechanics, like I had to go all over the country to find these people, right? Like I literally but that's kind of the magical thing, right? So you think about it from your perspective, and then that's how you realize whether it's the right decision to make or not.
That's a good point, because we had the recent unmasking of the food tech bubble. Like basically all these aggregators were delivering food, like about 100 of them, and like home chefs and all that, and like now they're like 8 people, and like basically I felt the companies felt like, we're the last person standing and we're good. No, boss, you're not. Because it's about cost per acquisition of customer is like 200 rupees, $3, $4. Multiply that and applying discounts, you just burn through big holes. In fact, I blame the IIT fraternity for sort of rigging that game up for the funding and basically killing the ecosystem while it was still in its infancy.
That's why I heavily encourage you to stop reading this shit.
Yeah.
Right? I stopped reading TechCrunch fucking like 5 years ago. Like I don't even read TechCrunch. I don't even know what the fuck is being funded. I don't care. The reason is this is a concentrated source of what appears to be, basically it's a lightning in a bottle. It's many lightning strikes being bottled up and then shared out as if it seems like it's normal. Yeah. But in reality, the norm is quite the opposite. The norm is most of the world is still companies that try to create value and try to become profitable and then share the profits back to their investors or back to the owners. That's kind of how the world works, right?
One of the biggest complaints I've had while conversing with entrepreneurs is like they're like competition, And I think you had a brilliant quote, I think, on your LinkedIn post the other day, which was you have to earn the right to be competition. So a little bit of thoughts for the room in terms of this.
So this is the way we did it. Again, it's different for you guys or whatever your approach is.
Quote?
The quote was, you have to earn your right to be a competitor. So someone will come to me like, so, hey, isn't like this company like a competitor to you? I'm like, no, they're not a competitor. They're an imitator right now. They have to earn the right to be a competitor. In the early days, it is very wise for you not to admit that you have competition. In fact, when a VC asks you, oh, isn't this like you're like, I don't even consider them in our competitive set. They're not even remotely close to what we do, right? Why would you even compare us to this person? Like literally be like that. And they're like, well, it's a category. I mean, no, because if you want me to be a category creator, and we are a category creator, we're in a category of our own. We're not competing against these guys. The reason why that's strategic is because you begin to help people think about you differently, and then you remove their ability to compare you. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, right? You want them to compare you when the data is good, right? Everything is doing this, right? But you don't want them to compare you when they just don't understand your business, but they have to be able to view you as an individual unit of something that has a lot of potential. So that's why competition is an interesting dynamic. And I think that okay, here's the other thing we did. We never looked at our competition and said, they're doing this, we gotta do this, right? You always want to take your own path and say, this is what I feel is the path of our product, and we're gonna execute on that. And then that becomes what people do. And that's what happens. It's always windshield, not rear view mirror. That's kind of how we look at it, right? Always look forward, don't look backwards and try to check behind your shoulder to see what other people are doing. And that's where then you become the person that everyone else is looking at. And again, I'm not trying to come across a certain way, but when we came up with moments and serendipity and moments that matter and targeting people in moments in mobile, now I'm not, again, not claiming anything, but now all of a sudden everyone's talking about moments.
He's being humble. He's actually one of the guys who started capturing the moment and set the trend, and other competitors then came and started involving themselves.
But that doesn't mean that it's a good thing either, right? Because now everyone's saturating the market with their super fucking confusing explanations, right? So what we did to go against this is we actually pushed out an image that is the formula for moments and branded it Kiip. And so now people are using our formula to explain the shit that they copied us about. Which is fine, because it means that we're the ones who define it, right? It's important.
How did you go about getting your early users? What was Kiip doing in the first 3 months?
So the best way to get your early users or customers is to use nepotism. So in other words, use people who like you just because. And meaning our first couple customers were actually from our investors, right? One of our customers was the CMO of Vitamin Water. Our first customer was Vitamin Water, right? So you want people who are believing in your product and willing to bet on you, and that's kind of the people who will end up, being your first few customers. There's really no other reason why, right? Like, why should I trust you? Like, you're a tiny company, But if you end up getting someone to believe in you, you can usually get those first few, and then you have to succeed, obviously, very well with those, and then go beyond.
What are your thoughts when it comes to rocket entrepreneurship? Like when it comes to pick up something that works somewhere and then deploy it in a foreign market, alien market?
Oh, I see. Rocket Internet, you mean? Yeah. I think those guys have figured out something that I just think most people haven't, right? I don't even know what they've, like, I think they're so clever in how they've executed, it's really hard to break down their formula. In fact, their shit's going to be talked about for decades, right? As far as I understand it, they basically have just built an engine for producing companies and getting them funded in huge amounts to basically be the first mover or destroy all the little counterparts. In fact, I don't know if I think there has to be a formal business term for this, but basically it's the idea of hyper capitalizing. So it's similar to like Jet, Jet.com, right? Jet got acquired by Walmart very recently, but Jet was able to raise the money it needed to instantly become an Amazon competitor, right? But like you need to be able to raise that, and so the Samwer brothers said, okay, we have the profile to be able to raise the billions of dollars that we need to basically instantly become a massive e-commerce company in a region that needs an e-commerce company, right? So they looked at it and said they need an e-commerce company. There's no big one there. We can just instantly become one if we invest heavily. And then not only do you just throw money at it, you need to have the right vehicle, right? Like if you don't have the right engine to pour the gas in, then it's a total disaster. It could blow up. But they figured out how to deploy engines and just pour in gas and then does a thing.
Because in India what we notice is that someone does something unique, literally within a month, 2 months, 6 months, there's 100 different people doing exactly that.
Yeah.
And I mean the scale at which people are just copying each other.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like breaking from the clutter, like in terms of competition domestically, forget international markets, but domestically, like that's something that bothers me.
Yeah.
That people don't respect intellectual property.
Well, okay, so I'll put it this way. I'm a meritocratic person. I believe that if someone out executes you, it's kind of fair game. Right? If you came up with the idea, I don't give a fuck. If you can't execute it properly, it's your loss, right? So I think there's no such thing as original ideas. That's the other thing too. Every idea has already been done, okay? Like, quite honestly. Yes, there's the exceptions, right? Like someone invents some ridiculous shit, whatever. Like silly putty or something. That's unique. But point is, there's only so many ideas that have been, sloshed around, and I think execution is key. That's why I kept on saying that execution is critical. But I understand the dynamic of respecting intellectual property and whatnot, but I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like, they might even think it's their own too, right? In fact, sometimes I meet people face to face who I know has copied our shit directly, and they, for some reason, have convinced themselves that they have not done that, right? And I'm like, all right, whatever, man. It's your own shit. You can figure it out, right? I'll just execute. I'll out execute you, and it doesn't matter anymore, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, what I meant by intellectual property, I mean, of course, we talk about the idea when we think intellectual, but it moves into a property form, which is they just copy your code and deploy it.
Oh yeah, they're breaking the law. Then that's obviously another entirely different story. But
In India, like, it's okay to do that in certain cases.
well, there's a lot of things like you can. Apparently, you can drink and drive in India. So there's a lot of things you can do. Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah.
I don't want to come.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not driving. Don't worry.
I have a question. So you spoke a lot about success and what were some of the initial learnings, I would not call it failures, in this entire product journey that you had?
Yeah. First of all, success is very relative, and I think I'm in the first inning of like a. I don't even. Do you have innings in cricket games? Okay, yeah. Of how many innings in cricket games?
Depending upon which game you're looking at.
So kind of like baseball, but is it around 9 innings? Is the okay?
4 max.
4 innings.
That's a test match, happens 5 days.
Okay, I've never watched a cricket game. Okay, fine, whatever. Point is, very early in whatever. My biggest competition is myself, right? Is to beat myself. I think when you look at other people and try to measure against them, it's like the worst thing you could do, right? Because it's very unhealthy, and you're almost comparing yourself to something that you cannot control. You can control yourself, which is amazing, right? So you can use that as a measure. The learnings, though, that I had mainly were around letting go. What I mean by letting go is a lot of us are very big perfectionists, right? When you are starting companies, your baby, you need to, you really want to make sure everything's perfect. Then I learned very quickly that my version of perfect is very different than other people's versions of perfect. And if you empower them to do their version of perfect, it literally changes the game. In fact, they will come up with ideas that are way better than your idea, right? Like I'm talking like my ideas suck right now. Like I would be in meetings and someone would be like, Brian, just shh, here's what we're gonna do. And I'm like, great, you go for it. So that's kind of what I think you should think about. It's like, the moment you let go, the moment magical things start to happen. But obviously this is obviously important that you have people who are self-guided, autonomous.
Micromanaging or like?
No, fuck micromanaging. In fact, if you have to micromanage, you're doing something wrong, right? You need to basically, the way I look at leadership and management, and they're very different things, but as a leader, your goal is to enable, not to instruct. Your job is to give resources and to open doors, and the rest they take care of. They go through the door, they choose how fast they go, they choose what they want to bring through it and do whatever they want to do, right? Perhaps the most interesting leadership lesson I've learned was like 2 months ago. I was in Israel, and it was a leadership thing actually. It was part of the Forbes 30 under 30 thing. But they brought us to our first activity. We literally landed off like a 14-hour flight, and the first thing they said is, okay, we're gonna go to the field and we're gonna herd some sheep. And I'd never been a shepherd in my life, obviously, and they said, do you think about the whole, even if you don't believe in religion, there's obviously, Jesus was a shepherd, right? Moses was a shepherd, Abraham was a shepherd. All these guys were a shepherd. Obviously, there's a reason why they're all shepherds. So let's just go and herd some sheep. So they brought us all to the field, and they're literally goats, sheep, and whatever. They're just like, okay, the exercise is get this huge group of sheep from here to there. Basically, 90% of the group went to the front and went like, okay, come on over here. They point in directions, all this shit, and it never worked. And the small group went to the back and just started doing this, just like kind of guiding, and then the whole flock kind of just went wherever you kind of guide. So the leadership lesson is you lead from behind.
Brian,
Yeah.
you're in India,
Yeah.
you're talking about leadership,
Yeah.
and you've done your minor in politics.
Yeah.
So what's your view on Indian politics, Narendra Modi, and you've heard a lot.
Let's start with US politics. And then
Yeah, I mean the
Trump-
impact
Trump
of
or-
politics, the impact of policy on,
So I in an effort to not be too political in my answer, although that's what you're trying to ask me for, I will explain to you kind of the value of government and the part it plays in our lives. And I think, first of all, I actually have to put it this way. I mean, it's pretty I hope it's a shared opinion here that Modi is pretty fucking awesome. Like the dude has a great brand. He goes out there. He's been pushing a lot of really modern things, and I think the fact that he showed up with Zuckerberg and did a whole live stream thing, and like you just keep on hearing like positive things, which is a good thing. I think as a brand, it's good to have a leader that's revered and admired.
He has strong PR.
Yes, great. And I'm sure that the next thing that goes after that, he's got great PR, but then, you know, when it comes to shit he does here, maybe there's issues. I don't know. But like everyone has their opinions about this. But I think for me, the bottom line is it's good when there's a movement. Made in India, I think, is very healthy. I think there's things that are happening that, like Startup India, like things that are happening that, and then Modi has apparently his own event that he's bringing startups and helping facilitate these things. It's a good thing when the political, when your government is trying to promote a certain mindset. And then now what happens is everyone in the country is looking at this and going, this is a real thing. It's legitimate now, right? Like imagine now, before that all happened, like if you told your parents you're gonna go off and do a startup, it's like, what is going on, right? Well, are you out of your mind? Now it's like, it's acceptable, which I think is a smart thing. So I think government has its play there for sure. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, here's how I also look at politics after studying political science. Politics is less about the study of government, it's more about the study of power. So the value I derived from studying political science was about how power structures play into everyday life. At the end of the day, there's politics at work, there's politics in families, there's politics in relationships, there's politics everywhere. It's a structure of power. So when you can analyze and break down and notice and identify trends in power structures, then you can navigate around them and you can win. That's the reason why politics is valuable. That's how I look at it. I'm very, sort of dislocated from any political views per se, like, because at the end of the day, I also think that personally, this is my views, I should spend my energy on creating stuff. And no offense to politicians, but they're the last group that creates things, right? Like they do create, but they create in the form of noticing everything, sitting on it for years, and then finally writing a fucking bill. And then even then nothing gets created, right? But that's fine, right? That's just how politics has operated for years and years and years. But, I would say there's been really promising things. Like in the US, I would say the environment for getting a visa or getting a green card was a lot worse 5 years ago. Now, they turn a blind eye and they say, hey, if you're trying to create a company, we're not going to, stop you, right? It's a good thing, right?
We see a lot of countries now actually supporting startups.
Yeah.
Having subsidies.
Canada has a great visa now. Startup Chile was one of the original programs. I mean, this is a lot of great things happening. So, there's always good and bad things about these things, and I always like to look at the positive. Yeah.
So another question follow up on that is, if you had to start over, what would you not do, or what would you do differently?
Oh, there's like a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I could write a lot of this is positively encompassed in this, but I think the main thing was like, I took myself very seriously. You make a big deal out of everything, right? The more you make a big deal out of little things, the more you make yourself unhappy. In fact, there's a book that I've been reading called Meditations. Have you guys heard of it? By Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. It's been translated, obviously, but the book is actually him writing to himself. It's not actually, it wasn't ever designed for public consumption. But a big part of the book is, it talks about how to handle things that go the wrong way. So one of the things that he talks about is really fascinating is, okay, and this I'm getting very philosophical, but let's say a house burns down, or your house burns down. The act or the thing that happened of the house burning down is there's no negative or positive component to it. It's how you perceive it that makes it positive or negative. So that's kind of just a way to describe, I think, in startups, you're very quick to make a judgment, right? And it goes good or bad. What is good or bad, right? That is only how you paint it. So for me, basically every day, a lot of things happen, right? I'm talking, it's a bit of a roller coaster. You wake up in the morning, and for me, for me right now, it's actually at night. So it's like before I go out or grab dinner, the phone starts blowing up, and then you look at this shit, and the point is you can't instantly make judgment. That's the other thing too. This is one thing in the earlier days I would change, is not making instant judgment. Being a lot more calm about how you perceive the events that have unfolded, and then be calm and collected in how you act.
Right.
I think that's very important. One thing I think is very certain for you guys to know is that as a founder, your job is to set the direction. Your job is to be the North Star. If anyone ever sees you freak out, game over, right? You need to be calm, collected, thoughtful, and directional. When everything is blowing up, everyone's going to look to you at what the next step is going to be. And even if you don't know what that next step is, just pick it. That's the other thing too. Inaction is worse than taking an action in this particular case. Because you always, as a startup, need to be moving forward. And that's the only way you can do it.
Abraham, I think Karan asked you a question about Pokemon Go. And in your world, you come across a lot of these fads which come and go,
Yeah.
right? And in your world, you have to keep up with those fads because they make or break you, right? So if you latch onto a fad which becomes a big bubble and stays on for a long time, it helps you from a revenue perspective. How do you all monitor these fads? I think it's an important part for your developers and DMOs.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's no way to know for sure what everything is going to be in terms of, I have no idea. I had no idea Flappy Bird was going to be a thing, right? I like, no one knew, like, what the fuck, right? So I think the answer is just to be diversified enough in your perspective to be able to give certain things a chance to be successful without instantly making judgment, right? So, you know, there's a lot of things that you might look at and think you know, but you look a little deeper, it appears very different. And then also not feeling bad about yourself if you don't latch on to one, because there will always be something, right? That's the other thing too, is there's always going to be the next thing. And I think being too impatient and chasing each one is going to kill you, right? Because that is a resource-intensive exercise. But what I think is really smart is doing this, saying that the excitement, what I think is going to be the next hockey stick curve of growth is going to happen in this area. And I'm only going to point my telescope this way. And if I find it, then great. If I don't, then I made the wrong bet, right? But you need to be able, and then occasionally moving it around, but not all the time, because that also confuses the shit out of your team, right? Your team needs to have a stable view of the vision. So, for example, at the beginning of every year, I send out this document called the painted picture. It's actually very ironic because there's no pictures. It's just a huge essay. It's like a 6-page, 7-page long essay. What it is it's my voice, and it's an explanation of what I believe for the year is our strategic vision. And this painted picture we refer to all the time, and it gives my team something to look at whenever something seems to be off. And then is something that people can use to keep me responsible. They're like, you fucking wrote it, right? It's really important for people to question you too, I think, because that way it's a healthy exercise. You don't want to be leading like a dictator. I think dictating is challenging because then you get, it's kind of the whole like, Rome was burning while I was playing the violin, because he didn't realize that the fiddle. Sorry, because people didn't realize wasn't listening. He wasn't paying attention. And I think if you let people disagree with you, you're able to then pay attention.
Miss?
Yeah.
Yeah. So earlier when you were answering your question about when you lack technical background and you're trying to search for someone who has it, who can fill in that gap. So you answered that the good way to go about is to learn it yourself. So you're not being like fooled around, or you can do it yourself. Now, getting it back to you, you said you had a design background, you have a commerce degree, and you have launched basically something for advertising, and it's a proper tech startup. Do you have like formal, do you have technical background for yourself, like personally?
Mm-hmm.
Because you mentioned you launched a company with 2 of your friends who have the back-end and the front-end experience.
Yep.
So how does the equity talk go between you all three, since you had the design and they had the knowledge?
So I would retort and say design is a technical skill. And I think design is in fact one of the most important technical skills. And I'm biased, obviously, because I think that when you look at the way that consumers consume digital products, it's design first. The engineering components are what makes it efficient, what makes it work, what makes it do what you said it's supposed to do. I don't think any one is more superior than the other. What I'm saying is they work together in harmony. So the way that I think design has a very interesting value here is what happens is you can basically depict what you want it to be, even without it functioning. And in fact, in early days, when you have an idea, it doesn't have to function perfectly. It just has to be visually indicative of what you want it to do. And so I think that's the most important thing, at least in the early days. Segueing from this, I would say that the way you bring together your team is you don't want overlapping skills. You want to make sure there's enough of a division. I have seen countless co-founding units where there's, just like, founders on founders that do the same thing, and then what happens is one inevitably leaves. It's a given. Like, basically, you can't have people who are basically specializing in the same thing. That's why when you start your team or you build your team, you need to intentionally find people with complementary skill sets, not overlapping skill sets. I think that's very important. Yeah.
Okay, one more thing. So, where were you raised and where do you get your education from?
In Canada, in Vancouver.
And your company is in the States?
Yes.
So the thing is, at least over here, one main concern that you have is each market that you try to enter has a different thought process, a different way of entering. So maybe if I launch a service over here in Bombay, because I have been born and raised up here, I have this notion that I understand my market better, and it will be a hit over here. So I'll be, tomorrow I'm going to open in Bangalore. But even within the same country, within the same restrictions, you have the your service can fail in Bangalore. So what actually got you to launch something from Canada to be in US and now you have two offices to do it?
Yeah, so again, I'm overgeneralizing, and I'm not Indian. I don't understand the nuances between the cultures within India, but I know there's a lot. I know there's how many states are there and how many languages. I mean, there's like 30 languages or something, and like they say you go 10 kilometers and you hear another accent and you hear, it's like you eat different food. I get it, sort of. But my answer to you is look for things that aren't going to change between the different cultures. There's things like everyone still likes to get things for cheaper. Everyone still likes to eat good food. Everyone still likes to do shisha and hookah or whatever. Like everyone, it seems to be very universal. That I've noticed this. I'm obviously messing with you, but you know what I mean. Like, so look for the common piece, and then focus on those, and then implement cultural nuances when you're big enough to invest in doing that. Right. So that's why I think there's certain businesses that have succeeded by just finding the common need that is covering the biggest market, and then to accelerate the growth of adoption, adding in cultural nuances when you can, when you're able to, right? It's a very general answer to your question, but I think that's one way to try to look at it. Now, obviously, you might be talking about a service that's super specialized into a certain thing that only one part of the culture has, but then that's also, again, and I'm not trying to come across a certain way, that's your decision. You decided to go into making something that addresses a market that exists in Bombay. But the other thing I would put out there is there's 20 million people here, so there's a huge fucking market. There are countries in the world that don't even hold a candle to that population. So the other thing is there's a lot of opportunity, even if you decided to do one city, right? I mean, that's one way to look at it as well.
So what about the place you launched a company at? Were you there at some point earlier that you knew the streets, you knew the people, you knew some form of approaching, you had to approach developers separately and you had to approach advertisers separately. So
yeah.
Did you have a knowledge about that thing before you went in there, or is this just happened?
So to respect time, we'll take one more question and we'll we have pizza coming, right? Yeah, perfect. I know we could go on for hours, but I think a small group of us are gonna go to do stuff, like get drunk. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I have friends that are joining us there. Anyways, but things don't just happen, right? You have to be very strategic in the beginning. But I think what's important is leaving things to chance is a little bit less strategic when you're in the beginning stages. Over time, it's okay to let things play its course out, right? So for us, for example, now, we're kind of putting investments in different regions and seeing how things play out, and it's okay because you can afford to make these bets. But in the early days, have a plan so these people know what you're going to do next, And that way you know when you've actually learned something. Sometimes if you don't know that you've learned something, then the learning just gets lost. And the only way you know you learned something is if you said, we're going to do this, you do it, and then it doesn't work or it does work. You know, those are the very basic, important things. All right, one last question.
You get asked this a lot, but trends, e-commerce, Uber for everything, hyperlocal delivery, now it seems to be AR, VR. What's next? And what's your thing in your explanation?
The next thing I think is this concept called future time. And it's a term that I came up with, which is how do you predict what everyone's going to want? And it's a combination of AI, it's a combination of humans, it's a combination of data, it's a combination of everything. And basically the concept is, how do I basically project the next 12 hours of your life or the next hour of your life and what you might want to do, and then orient digital services to basically make things seamless. So say this technology, for some reason, it's either going to be a brain or a combination of technologies surrounding me, and it's going to be enabled by connected devices. But the moment I walk out of the door, there should be an Ola or an Uber waiting for me. The Uber should already have a destination of a bar nearby. It should have already texted all of my friends to come join me there. It should have had my credit card loaded up to buy my favorite beer. But, you know what I mean? Like, that's basically going to happen, right? And it's going to happen in certain extremes and certain sort of minimal impact. But I think if you start building services that can help contribute to future time, it could be completely massive. That's the trend that I see. Because it's servicing the human need. At the end of the day, the only trend that excites me is anything that services a true human need. And anything that's beyond that is all just noise.
Very interesting point, because I think this garner stuff, like how Kiip is now moving into Internet of Things and how you tied up with the automobile self-driving stuff. Maybe.
So yeah, so we started working with connected devices. So now, for example, like your car is connected, it runs out of gas or is about to run out of gas. We can then reward you with a gas card from Shell or Exxon or something. So the idea is predicting needs from the moments that happen. And digitally, that's a set of moments, and more of these moments are going to occur. And that is contributing to my vision of future time, which is what we're trying to specialize is rewarding in future time, right? So knowing what reward will help enable the next transaction or whatever. That's a specialty, right? There's other things that I could do, but that's distracting. That's one area that we want to look in. But AI, for the sake of AI, is not interesting. It's like the applicability of it to human needs that's critical. At the end of the day, I can't stress this enough. Humans have a lot of different needs. Is look at these needs and then build businesses off of them. We need to get around. We need to entertain ourselves. We need to procreate. We need to eat. We need to sleep. We need, like, there's just very simple needs. Anything that helps service that. Why do you think Casper is blowing up? Because we need to fucking sleep. That's that easy. Why do you think Soylent's blowing up? I think Soylent has its problems, like its branding blows. But, pardon?
What is it?
Soylent is a meal replacement. It's like you can eat an entire lunch in a bar, and you can drink your entire breakfast. Basically, that's the concept. But people need to eat, right? That's also another thing. The other thing is people need to connect, right? That's why Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat are the way they are, because people need to connect. And procreate, people need Tinder, right? That's, I mean, there's a lot of these things that, like, it's very simple to explain, right? So, yeah.
So on a lighter note, just to end,
Yeah.
do you subscribe to or do you believe in the Terminator theory? That someday machines will be
Oh.
far faster?
I don't think there's a lighthearted end to this thing. I think so I don't have one opinion that I think is going to be like it, but the most convincing argument I've ever heard is the singularity will happen. But here's what gets really scary, is the moment the singularity happens, within that fraction of a second that it happens, the machines will have invented more than humans have invented our entire history, and will invent things that we don't even understand. The same way that, you know, when a dog watches you talk, they can see you talk, but they have no idea what the fuck you're saying, and they can't learn English. That's not going to happen. It's the same way we're gonna look at computers, they're gonna do their shit, we're gonna like the dogs watching the humans talk. It's scary as fuck, but super exciting. And then the other thing is, either we will be obliterated at that very second, like they will wipe out the human race, or they won't. And the only reason why they won't obliterate us is because they need us. Yeah, that's the theory. That's very convincing. And in fact, the other theory is that it's already happened.
Can I add something?
Yeah, yeah.
There's machine racism already happening now.
What do you mean?
Most of us don't want to program systems which are smarter than us.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
There is racism already happening between humans and machines.
Have you guys watched the one with that movie with Benedict Cumberbatch, the Imitation Game?
Yeah.
I love that movie. That was very fascinating. Then there are crazy people that don't care, that are just gonna build, and it only takes one person, right? It only takes one person. That's all it takes. And by the way, I think that it's already happened. Yeah.
What that means?
The singularity.
So we are required.
But the machines are clever enough to have hidden the fact that it's happened. Okay, trippy as fuck. All right.
Like, no,
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.